The echo of iron doors closing behind you becomes a part of your heartbeat after enough years. The clang doesn't fade. It seeps into your bones until you forget there was ever silence before it. For 25 years, I have been a number in the system. Not a father, not a builder, not a man. Just a number on a khaki uniform, lost inside concrete and steel. And yet, one morning in late October, the number was called, and with it, something I thought I'd buried long ago. My name is Franklin Wade, but in this place, the Eastgate Correctional Facility in Ohio, names don't matter. Here, I am inmate 30217. I had just finished sweeping the tier floor when Officer Jenkins barked my number. His voice carried that mix of authority and exhaustion that only guards get after 20 years of watching men rot. 30217, you got mail? Mail? It's a word I hadn't heard in years, at least not with my name attached. My sister used to send me Christmas cards, until the shame of explaining to her church friends why her brother was locked up for embezzlement finally broke her. The last time I got anything in an envelope was almost a decade ago, and it was just paperwork from the state. The guard tossed the envelope through the bars. It landed on the thin mattress of my bunk like a piece of contraband. Yellowed edges, handwritten. A tremor ran through me even before I picked it up. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was my son's, Aaron Wade. The same boy I'd once walked to Little League practices. The same kid I worked double shifts to put through college. The same son who sat in a courtroom 25 years ago, pointing at me and swearing under oath that I'd stolen from the construction firm where we both worked. His testimony sealed my fate. Without him, I might have had a fighting chance. With him, I became the villain of the story. And now, after 5 years of silence, his handwriting was back in my hands. I sat down on the edge of my bunk, the springs creaking under my weight. The mattress had molded itself to my shape over the years, a permanent reminder of every sleepless night. My hands shook as I tore the envelope open. The smell of old paper and ink rose up like a ghost. "Dad," the letter began. I froze. He hadn't called me that in decades. In court, I was Franklin. In his interviews, I was the man who betrayed him. In his eyes, I had stopped being his father the moment he swore that I was guilty. "There's something you need to know," the letter continued. "You have a grandson. His name is Jacob. He's 15, and he wants to meet you." The words blurred. A grandson? My son had a son, and for 15 years I had no idea. Aaron explained that Jacob had been asking questions for a school project on family history. He'd told the boy I was in prison for a mistake, a minor theft, a softened version of the truth. He wanted me to write to Jacob, but only if I promised to stick to the lie. I crumpled the paper in my fist. Even now, after all these years, Aaron wanted to control the story. He wanted me to live inside the lie he had created, because the truth was brutal. It wasn't me who stole the money from Westfield Construction. It was Aaron. He forged my signature on contracts. He planted fake invoices. And on the night before I was arrested, he came into my house with a duffel bag. By the time the police raided the next morning, that bag had vanished. But $40,000 in cash was suddenly hidden under the floorboards of my bedroom. Aaron cried on the witness stand, told the jury his own father had betrayed him, stolen from the company he loved. And the jury believed him. Why wouldn't they? He was young, educated, polished. I was a middle-aged man with calloused hands and only a GED to my name. I took the fall. He took the money. And he took my life. "Frank, you okay?" The voice belonged to Officer Ramirez, one of the only guards who ever treated me like a human being. He was older, grayer than the rest, and he sometimes slipped me a second packet of sugar for my coffee when nobody was looking. "My son wrote me," I said, my voice cracking in a way that embarrassed me. "I have a grandson." Ramirez stepped closer to the bars. His lined face softened. "That's good news, ain't it?" "Good news?" I almost laughed. "The kid thinks his father's a saint and his grandfather's a thief. That's not good news. That's another lie. For years I had kept the truth bottled up. Every inmate in here has a story, and 9 out of 10 claim they're innocent. Nobody listens after a while. I screamed my innocence for the first 2 years, until the beatings and solitary broke me down. Then I stopped talking. I became just another guilty man waiting to die behind walls. But Ramirez didn't walk away. He leaned against the bars. "Maybe it's time somebody outside heard your side." I looked up sharply. "My brother-in-law's a lawyer," Ramirez said. "Not one of the big shot types, but he's decent. If you want, I can reach out." I shook my head bitterly. It's too late. Appeals deadlines passed decades ago, and even if they hadn't, what new evidence do I have? My son's word against mine. Guess whose word people believe? But Ramirez just shrugged. Sometimes the truth finds strange ways to surface. I thought of Jacob, a 15-year-old boy who knew nothing of the reality, who thought his father was the honest one, who might grow up repeating the same mistakes if no one corrected the record. The thought lit a small spark inside me, one I hadn't felt in a long, long time. That night, I sat under the dim light of my cell and began to write. Not to Aaron, to Jacob. "Dear Jacob," I scratched in my rough handwriting. "I'm your grandfather. There's a lot I'd like to tell you, but first I want to know about you. What do you enjoy? How's school? I hear you want to meet me." Nothing would mean more. I hesitated. Should I tell him everything? Should I tear down the image of his father? No, not yet. First, I had to earn his trust. So I stayed close to the version Aaron had fed him, though every letter burned as I wrote it. I needed the boy to keep writing back, to want to know more, because Jacob might be the only bridge left between me and the outside world, my last chance to set the record straight, and maybe, just maybe, my redemption. As I sealed the letter, I felt something shift in me. For 25 years, I had lived without purpose, just waiting for the days to end. Tonight, for the first time, I had a reason to wake up tomorrow. The clang of the cell door closing didn't feel quite the same. If you've stayed with me through the beginning of my story, I'd love to know something personal from you too. Tell me in the comments what city you're listening from right now. It means more than you know to hear where these words reach. And if my story moved you even a little, please like this video and subscribe for more chapters, because what comes next will change everything. Prison time doesn't move like real time. Days here don't pass. They drag, scraping across your skin like sandpaper. Nights are worse. Sleep is light, broken by shouts down the tier, by the metallic rattle of keys, by memories that sneak in uninvited. So when I sent that first letter to Jacob, I braced myself for silence. I'd been forgotten before. Why wouldn't it happen again? But 3 days later, Officer Jenkins barked my number. 30217, mail. This time I didn't wait for the envelope to land. I snatched it out of the air like a starving man grabbing bread. The handwriting was different. Neat, young, steady. Not Aaron's. It was Jacob's. "Dear Grandpa," the letter began. I stared at that word, Grandpa. Nobody had ever called me that before. For a moment, I couldn't even keep reading. "I'm glad you wrote back," Jacob continued. "I've been asking Dad about you for years, but he always said it was better if we didn't talk. Now I finally get the chance." The boy's words were polite, but beneath them I could feel the hunger, the curiosity. My school project is about family history. Most kids write about their grandparents being in the war, or about where their families immigrated from. But I wanted to write about you, about the truth. I held my breath. "Dad says you made a mistake, that you took some money from work. He says it wasn't a lot, but the company wanted to make an example. I don't understand why you'd be punished for so long if it was something small. Can you tell me more? What really happened?" My hands shook. The boy wasn't satisfied with Aaron's sugar-coated version. He wanted details. He wanted the holes filled. At the bottom of the letter, he'd added, "P.S. I've been talking to Mrs. Quinn. She lives 3 doors down from us. She told me she remembers you from before you went away. She says you worked on your house every weekend, that you were the hardest working man on the block. She said she saw something strange the night before your arrest, but I don't know if I should believe her. She said she saw Dad carrying a bag into your house. Was that true?" I nearly dropped the paper. Mrs. Quinn. She remembered. The past surged back, the night before my arrest. I was in the kitchen, still in my work boots, exhausted. Aaron had shown up late, sweat on his face, clutching a heavy duffel bag. I'd asked what was inside. He muttered something about tools he'd bought cheap, then shoved past me and went upstairs. By the time I followed, the bag was gone. The next morning, detectives tore up my bedroom floor and found what they needed. And now, 25 years later, my grandson had stumbled into the one witness who had seen that bag. That evening, Ramirez stopped by my cell. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I handed him the letter. He read it slowly, his brows rising. "This Quinn lady still alive? That's something. She's the only one who can prove Aaron planted that money." Ramirez folded the letter carefully, slid it back through the bars. "Frank, I think you should let my brother-in-law hear this. With a statement like hers, maybe there's a chance." "Montes?" I asked, remembering the name from our last talk. "Yeah, he's not flashy, but he's solid. He owes me a favor. I can ask him to come by. Hope is dangerous in prison. It's like water in the desert. It can keep you alive, or it can make you lose your mind chasing mirages. But that night, lying on my thin mattress, I let myself sip it." A week later, the lawyer came. His name was Daniel Montes. Short, stocky, with thick glasses and a cautious way of speaking, like every word had to be weighed. We sat across from each other in the visitation room, separated only by the scratches in the metal table. "Mr. Wade," he said, "Ramirez tells me you've maintained your innocence for 25 years. I nodded. "Doesn't everybody in here?" He didn't smile. "Most. That's why I'm skeptical. But your situation caught my attention, especially this part." He tapped a folder, copies Ramirez must have given him of Jacob's letter. "If this neighbor of yours really remembers your son carrying a bag into your house the night before the police found cash there, that's significant." I leaned forward. She could change everything. "Maybe. But the courts don't like reopening old wounds. We'd need more than memory. We'd need documents, inconsistencies, proof that what the jury saw wasn't the full picture." "Proof," I echoed, the word tasting bitter. Proof was what I'd never had. Montes adjusted his glasses. "Let me ask you directly. Did your son commit this crime?" The words caught in my throat. Saying them out loud felt like betraying the same boy I once carried on my shoulders. But silence had destroyed me already. "Yes," I said finally. "Aaron stole the money. He framed me to save himself." Montes studied me. "Do you realize what you're saying? If we pursue this, your son could face charges. Your grandson will learn the truth." My chest tightened. I thought of Jacob's neat handwriting, his questions, his hunger for honesty. "He deserves to know who his grandfather really is," I said, "not the lie his father built." For the first time, Montes's expression softened. He closed the folder. "I'll start digging, no promises, but I'll see what I find." That night, I wrote back to Jacob. "Dear Jacob," I began, my pencil scratching against the thin prison paper. "You asked what really happened. The truth is complicated. Your father told you part of the story, but not all of it. It wasn't a small mistake. It was bigger than that, bigger than I could have imagined. I can't tell you everything yet, but I can tell you this. What Mrs. Quinn remembers is important. Ask her again. Ask her to write down exactly what she saw that night. Keep her story safe." I paused, staring at the gray walls of my cell. Should I go further? Should I tell him his father was lying? No, not yet. Not until I knew the boy could handle it. Instead, I ended the letter with softer words. "I'm proud of you for wanting the truth, Jacob. That makes you different from most. That makes you mine." The days crawled by. I forced myself not to hope, not to expect a reply. But a week later, another envelope slid through the bars. This time, Jacob's letter was longer. "Grandpa," it began, "I talked to Mrs. Quinn like you said. She remembers everything. She said she saw Dad with the duffel bag and that he told her it was tools from a job. She said at the time she didn't think much of it, But now she realizes it was the night before the police came for you. She told me she tried to mention it years ago, but nobody wanted to hear her. She was just the neighbor, and Dad convinced her she was mistaken. I pressed the paper to my chest. After 25 years, the story was finally being spoken aloud. "Grandpa," Jacob wrote, "I don't know what to believe. I love my dad. But if what Mrs. Quinn says is true, then he's been lying to me all my life. Please tell me the truth. Please don't leave me in the dark like he did." Tears burned my eyes. The boy was ready. The next visitation day, Montes returned. He was more animated this time. "I tracked down the original Westfield case files," he said. "Guess what? They still exist, and I've already spoken with a forensic handwriting expert. If we can get access to the documents your son supposedly signed with your name, they might be able to prove forgery." "After all these years?" I asked, hardly daring to believe. "Science is better now. Pressure patterns, ink distribution, even microtremors in the strokes. If your son faked your signature, it'll show." I gripped the table. My heart pounded like it hadn't in decades. "There's more," Montes said. "An old accountant from Westfield, a man named Ronald Gibbs, remembers some shady numbers before the big theft. He's retired now, but he's willing to talk. He hinted your son might not have acted alone." Alone. The word sliced me. Could there have been someone else? Another shadow in this story I didn't know. Montes leaned closer. "If Gibbs gives us a statement, if Mrs. Quinn writes hers, and if the handwriting analysis proves forgery, we could actually file a motion." For 25 years, I'd trained myself not to dream. But as I sat there in the visitation room, watching Montes gather his notes, the dream clawed its way back. Freedom. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought of Jacob, his neat handwriting, his questions, his belief that I might be innocent. For the first time in a quarter century, I believed it might be possible to look him in the eye, outside these walls, and answer him. The morning they told me I had a visitor, my stomach twisted in ways I hadn't felt since sentencing day. For years, visitation meant lawyers, or pity visits from distant relatives, or sometimes nobody at all. But when the guard said the name out loud, Jacob Wade, I nearly forgot how to breathe. My grandson. The walk to the visitation room was only 100 feet, but my legs felt heavy, as if each step carried the weight of 25 wasted years. Prison has a smell. Bleach, sweat, metal, and somehow it felt sharper that morning, slicing through the air like nerves. Inside the visitation room, time slowed. Plastic chairs scraped the floor, guards leaned against walls pretending not to eavesdrop, families murmured to inmates with voices low enough to hide shame. And then I saw him. Jacob, 15 years old, tall for his age, his dark hair falling over a forehead that looked like mine. His jaw was sharp, his shoulders narrow but squared with defiance. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on me. Those eyes, my own staring back. He froze. For a heartbeat, we just looked at each other. Two strangers bound by blood and secrets. Then, slowly, he walked toward my table, Mrs. Quinn beside him for moral support. I stood, hands trembling against the cuffs on my wrists. "Grandpa?" he asked, his voice breaking on the word. That one word pierced deeper than any gavel, deeper than any cell door slamming shut. I nodded. "Jacob?" He didn't hesitate. He wrapped his arms around me, awkward with the restraints, but firm. I hadn't been hugged in decades. My knees almost buckled. We sat down. Mrs. Quinn gave me a sad smile before taking a seat a few chairs away, pretending to read while giving us privacy. Jacob leaned forward, elbows on the scratched metal table. His eyes studied every line in my face, every scar time had carved. "You look like Dad," he said finally. The words cut. People used to say he looked like me. Jacob nodded slowly, then pulled a notebook from his backpack. "I brought questions for my project." I chuckled despite the tightness in my chest. "You're serious about this schoolwork, huh?" "It's not just school," he whispered, glancing at the guard. "I need to know who you are. I need to know if Dad's been lying to me." For a long moment, I just watched him. This boy had been kept in the dark for 15 years. Every instinct told me to protect him, to shield him from the ugliest truths. But I also knew lies were poison. Lies had already cost me my freedom, my marriage, my life. So I answered carefully. "Your dad told you I made a mistake," I began. "That's not wrong. My mistake was trusting people I shouldn't have, believing family would never betray me. That mistake cost me everything." He frowned. "Mrs. Quinn says she saw Dad bring a bag into your house the night before the police came. She says she thinks that's important. Is it true?" The question hung heavy in the air. I looked at him, those same eyes I'd seen in the mirror half my life, and for the first time I let the silence carry the weight. Then I said, "Yes, it's true." His pen slipped in his hand. "So?" He lied. I wanted to reach across the table to grab his hand, to tell him it wasn't that simple. But it was. He deserved honesty. "Jacob," I said softly, "your father loved you, loves you, but he made choices years ago that destroyed me. And if he's still lying to you, then maybe he's afraid those choices will destroy him too." Jacob's face hardened in a way no 15-year-olds should. "I found papers," he whispered. "Old bank statements in Dad's closet. Deposits that don't make sense. Thousands of dollars, months before you were arrested." The room tilted. Proof, the kind I'd prayed for. "Does your father know you saw them?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. He shook his head. "Not yet. I made copies. I hid them." His voice trembled, but his jaw stayed tight. "I want to help you, Grandpa. I want to make it right." My throat closed. The boy wasn't just curious. He was brave, reckless, and now, possibly in danger. "You need to be careful," I warned. "Your father isn't the only one who wanted me gone. There were others. Powerful people. If they think you're digging too deep, I don't care." He interrupted, his voice fierce. "I want the truth." For a second, I saw my late wife's fire in him, that unshakable sense of right and wrong. It broke me and healed me all at once. Mrs. Quinn approached, touching Jacob's shoulder. "We should go soon," she said gently. Jacob looked back at me, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'll write again, and I'll keep looking. I promise." He hugged me once more before walking away, his notebook clutched like a weapon. Watching him leave was like watching my soul walk out the door. That night in my cell, I couldn't stop shaking. I replayed every second of that meeting, every question, every glance. For 25 years, I'd been buried alive. And now, somehow, my grandson was digging me out with bare hands. But a gnawing fear chewed at me. If Aaron discovered what Jacob was doing, what would he do to stop it? 2 days later, Montes returned with news. "Your neighbor Quinn has agreed to give a statement," he said, sliding papers across the visitation table. "She's sharp, remembers everything. That's gold for us." "And Jacob?" I asked anxiously. Montes hesitated. "The boy's smart, too smart. He contacted me directly." My chest tightened. "He what?" "He found my office number, called me himself, said he had documents, bank records, old receipts, maybe even a travel stub in your son's name from the week of the theft. He wants me to see them." I slammed my fists on the table. "That's dangerous. If Aaron finds out..." Montes raised a hand. I told him to be cautious. "But Frank, listen to me. This kid might be the key. With his evidence, plus Quinn's testimony, plus forensic analysis on the old contracts, we could finally have a real shot." Hope and dread twisted inside me like twin blades. That night, lying awake, I thought of Aaron, my boy, my betrayer, the man who stole my freedom. What would he do if he realized his own son was tearing down the wall of lies he'd built? I didn't know the answer, but I feared it. And I knew one thing. Jacob was walking straight into a storm, and somehow from inside these walls, I had to find a way to protect him. Prison changes the way you measure time. Out there, people talk in weekends, in birthdays, in holiday breaks. In here, we measure in envelopes and visitations, Every letter is a mile marker on a road that otherwise never moves. So when days passed without word from Jacob, I felt the old panic creep back in. Had Aaron found out? Had he shut the boy down, or worse? The answer came in the most unexpected way. It was a Thursday afternoon. The yard was buzzing with its usual soundtrack, sneakers pounding the track, cards slapped on tables, the occasional shout rising and fading like thunder. I was halfway through my third lap when Ramirez approached, his walk brisker than usual. "Frank," he muttered low, breaking the rules by using my real name. "Visitation. Now." My pulse kicked. "Who?" "Not your lawyer. Not the kid. Your son. Aaron." For a second I thought I'd misheard. Aaron hadn't visited me in over 10 years, not since the last time he came to warn me, with that smug smile, to stick to his version of events. And now he was here, unannounced. The visitation room felt different that day. Colder. The hum of voices dropped as I entered, maybe because the other inmates could see something in my face. I sat down at a corner table, cuffs biting my wrists, heart hammering, and then he walked in. My son, Aaron Wade, now 42 years old, looked nothing like the ambitious young man who'd stood against me in court. His hairline had receded, dark circles bruised the skin beneath his eyes, and his suit, once sharp, sagged as if it had been slept in. He looked like a man hollowed out by debts no paycheck could ever cover. "Dad," he said flatly as he sat. I studied him, drinking in the face of the boy I once carried on my shoulders, the man who'd put me behind bars. "What brings you here, son? Conscience finally catch up with you?" His jaw clenched. "Cut the crap. I know you've been talking to Jacob." The way he said it, Jacob, not my son, not your grandson, made my blood run cold. I leaned forward. "He came to me. He wants answers." "And you gave them?" Aaron hissed. His eyes darted to the guard before lowering his voice. "You have no idea what you're messing with. He's a kid. He doesn't need to know." "He doesn't need to live inside your lie either," I shot back. "He deserves the truth." Aaron smirked, but it wasn't confidence. It was desperation, thinly veiled. "Truth? You think anyone's going to believe you over me? After 25 years in a cage? You're a convict. I'm his father. He'll choose me." I held his gaze. Funny thing is, he's already starting not to. That rattled him. I saw it in the twitch of his hand, the flicker of fear across his face. "Listen to me," Aaron whispered fiercely. "There are things you don't know, people you don't know. You keep pushing, and Jacob could get hurt." The words dropped between us like a loaded gun. "What did you say?" I growled. Aaron rubbed his temples, suddenly weary. It wasn't just me. Back then, I wasn't the only one who wanted that money. I had help, powerful help. People who don't like loose ends. If this case gets reopened, they'll come for anyone digging around. That includes Jacob. I sat back, stunned. Pieces clicked together, Montes hinting about irregularities, the accountant Gibbs suggesting Aaron hadn't acted alone. Now it made sense. "Who?" I demanded. "Who helped you?" He shook his head. "You don't want to know." "I already know enough. Was it someone from Westfield? Was it higher?" Aaron's eyes flickered with panic before he masked it. "Drop it, Dad. Tell your lawyer to stop. Tell Jacob to stop, or this whole thing ends badly for all of us." He stood, adjusting his sagging suit jacket. For a moment, his eyes softened, the boy I once knew flickering behind the weary man. "I never wanted it to go this far," he muttered. "Too late," I said. Then he walked away, shoulders hunched, and the guard led me back to my cage. That night, I lay awake replaying every word. Aaron hadn't come to intimidate me. He'd come out of fear. He was unraveling, which meant Jacob's digging was working, and also that he was in real danger. 2 days later, Montes appeared at visitation. His expression was grave. "We might have a problem," he said. I almost laughed bitterly. "Just one?" "Jacob hasn't been to school in 3 days," Montes explained. "Mrs. Quinn says Aaron pulled him out suddenly. Told the principal it was a family emergency. She's worried. My chest constricted. Where is he? We don't know. She thinks Aaron sent him to stay with relatives out of state, maybe to cut him off from us. The table between us blurred as my fists tightened. That's kidnapping. Legally, it's parental rights, Montes said, but the timing, it stinks, and I don't like it. If Aaron thinks we're close to reopening the case, he might be trying to shut Jacob down before he talks. I stared at him, rage mixing with helplessness. He told me himself, other people were involved, dangerous people. What if this isn't just about shutting Jacob up? What if he's trying to protect him from them? Montes leaned back, rubbing his chin. Then we need to move faster. The following week blurred into a storm of rumors and scraps of news. Ramirez slipped me whispers when he could, that Montes was pushing the court for access to the old documents, that Gibbs, the accountant, was ready to make a sworn statement, that Mrs. Quinn had written a detailed affidavit. But none of it mattered without Jacob. The boy was the bridge, the proof, the voice that made my case more than just an old convict's plea. And he was gone. One evening, as lights out echoed across the tier, I found myself scribbling a letter I couldn't even mail. Aaron, I wrote, you've already taken my freedom, my marriage, my life. Don't take Jacob too. He deserves better than to carry your lies. If you can't give him truth, at least give him safety, please. I shoved the paper under my mattress, knowing it would never leave my cell. Because deep down, I suspected Aaron had already crossed the line where pleas made no difference. Weeks blurred. Every clang of the bars, every shuffle of feet outside my cell made me think of Jacob's face across that visitation table, his notebook full of questions. The silence hurt worse than solitary. Then one morning, Ramirez slipped an envelope into my hands. No return address, he muttered, his eyes sharp. But I think you'll want this. I tore it open. Inside, a single page in Jacob's neat handwriting. Grandpa, if you're reading this, I'm safe. Dad moved me to a different place, but I found a way to get this letter out. I can't say where I am, but I have copies of the papers. I hid them where he'll never find them. I'll get them to your lawyer soon, I promise. Don't give up. I pressed the letter to my chest, relief flooding through me. The boy was still fighting, and so was I. I used to think the worst part of prison was the silence, the endless hum of nothing, broken only by keys jangling or someone shouting down the tier. But I've learned there's something worse than silence. It's waiting. Waiting for a letter. Waiting for a visit. Waiting for news that could tilt your whole life one way or the other. For weeks after Jacob's secret letter, I lived on that edge. The boy had promised he was safe, promised he still had the papers, promised he'd find a way to get them to my lawyer. But promises don't always survive the real world, especially when his father was Aaron. On the first Friday of December, Officer Ramirez appeared at my bars with that look again, the one that meant trouble was coming. Visitation, he muttered. Not family, your lawyer. My stomach nodded as they led me to the visitation room. Montes sat waiting, his glasses slipping down his nose, his face pale. This isn't good, he said before I even sat down. What happened? Someone broke into my office last night. The words knocked the air out of me. Files gone? I asked, already knowing the answer. He nodded. Not everything, but enough. Copies of Quinn's statement, Gibbs's preliminary affidavit, even the draft motions I'd been preparing. They knew exactly what to take. Who? Montes spread his hands. Could have been anyone. But I think we both know Aaron isn't working alone. He as much as told you. I clenched my fists. And Jacob? Montes's voice dropped. He's the one who warned me. Left a voicemail on my private line. Said he saw someone following him. He mailed a package to me before the break-in, using an address he thought was safe. If he was right, those papers are still on their way. But Frank, I don't know how much longer he can keep this up without Aaron catching on. I shut my eyes. The thought of Jacob, barely 15, sneaking around like a spy in some pulp novel while grown men circled him. It made me want to tear through the bars, That night, I dreamt of my old house, the one I built with my hands, brick by brick. In the dream, I was on the roof hammering shingles, sweat running down my back, while Aaron, still a teenager, handed me nails from below. "You always told me to take shortcuts," he laughed. "Said I'd never make it if I didn't." I looked down at him. "I told you never to take shortcuts with the truth." He smirked. "Same thing." I woke with my heart pounding and the taste of rust in my mouth. 3 days later, Montes returned, a manila envelope in his hands. Jacob pulled it off. He said with a faint smile, "The package made it." My pulse quickened. "What's inside?" He opened it carefully. Bank statements, photocopies of receipts, a travel itinerary in Aaron's name showing a one-way ticket to Miami purchased 2 days before my arrest. "Running away," Montes said, holding up the stub. "He was going to disappear with the money until you got pinned. Then he stayed to play the role of the betrayed son." I felt the room spin. Proof. For years I'd dreamed of it, begged for it, prayed for it, and now it sat on the table. "This changes everything," Montes said. With Quinn's statement, Gibbs's testimony, the handwriting analysis, and now this. "Frank, we can file." My throat tightened. "After 25 years. But his smile faded. "Don't celebrate yet. Whoever broke into my office will know they failed. They'll come harder. And if they realize Jacob was the source," the thought made me sick. A week later, the prison chaplain tapped on my bars during evening count. He wasn't a man who lingered, usually just offered a nod, a prayer if you wanted it. But this time, he pressed an envelope into my hand. "No return address," he said. "Came through the mailroom with my batch. Thought you'd want it sooner." My hands trembled as I opened it. It was Jacob's handwriting. "Grandpa," the letter began. "Dad's acting strange, nervous all the time. He knows someone is closing in, but he doesn't know it's me. I'm keeping quiet. I don't trust anyone else in the house. But I found something more important than the papers. A notebook. It's written in code, but I think it's Dad's. He writes down everything, dates, names, amounts. I don't understand it all, but it looks bad, real bad. I'm going to try to copy some pages. I'll send them to Mr. Montes if I can." My heart pounded. A coded notebook. If it was what it sounded like, it could be the nail in Aaron's coffin, and maybe the rope that finally pulled me out of mine. But all I could think was, Jacob was walking deeper into fire. That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't even pretend. Ramirez noticed when he came by. "You look worse than usual," he said, leaning against the bars. I told him in a whisper about the notebook. He whistled low. "If that kid keeps poking around, someone's gonna notice." "You think your son would really hurt him?" The question made me recoil. "He's my son. He wouldn't—" My voice cracked. Even I didn't believe it. Ramirez shook his head. "Blood doesn't stop men when they're desperate. I've seen it too many times." The following Saturday, Jacob appeared in visitation. My chest nearly burst just seeing him, alive, unbroken. He slid into the seat, glancing around nervously. His backpack sat at his feet, bulging with papers. "I don't have much time," he whispered. "Dad dropped me off, said I could stay for half an hour, but he's waiting in the parking lot." I gripped the table. "Jacob, this is too dangerous. He knows something's up. If he catches you, I don't care." Jacob interrupted, his eyes blazing with the same stubborn fire I once saw in his grandmother. "I found the notebook. Look." He pulled out photocopies, pages filled with Aaron's cramped handwriting, numbers, initials, dollar amounts, dates matching the months before my arrest. Montes, seated 2 tables away pretending to be just another visitor, watched carefully as Jacob slipped the copies into a folder. "This proves it," Jacob whispered. "Dad wasn't alone. Look at these initials, LM. They appear everywhere. Payments, meetings. Whoever LM is, he was involved from the start." The initials stabbed at me. LM, could it be? I remembered the owner's son at Westfield Construction, Lucas Martin. Slick, privileged, always circling around the office like he owned it. He'd had access. He'd had motive. I felt the blood drain from my face. Jacob, listen to me. You need to stay out of this now. Montes and I can take it from here. No, he said firmly. I'm part of this. You're my family. I'm not stopping. I wanted to scream, to beg him to walk away before it destroyed him too. But the fire in his eyes told me it was useless. He was his father's son, yes. But more than that, he was mine. When visitation ended, Jacob hugged me hard. His backpack was lighter, the copies safely in Montes's possession. As the guards led me back, Montes caught my eye and gave the faintest nod. We had enough now to push forward. But the joy of that moment twisted into dread as I realized something terrifying. Aaron had been unraveling. LM was still out there, still powerful, still invested in keeping the truth buried. And Jacob had just painted a target on his own back. There's a sound prison makes at night, when the lights dim and the corridors go quiet. It's not silence, not really. More like a low hum of dread, the creak of pipes, the coughs and mutters of men who can't sleep. But to me, it has always felt like the sound of waiting. That night, the waiting ended. It was near midnight when Ramirez stopped by my cell, his flashlight beam cutting through the bars. His face was tighter than I'd ever seen it. "You awake, Frank?" "Like I ever sleep," I muttered, sitting up on the thin mattress. He slipped an envelope between the bars. "This came in late. Mailroom tried to hold it, but I pulled some strings. Thought you should see it now." I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was Jacob's handwriting. "Grandpa," the letter began, "I think Dad knows. He's been watching me closer, taking my phone at night, asking too many questions. Yesterday, he searched my backpack. I had to hide the copies at Mrs. Quinn's house so he wouldn't find them. I'm scared, but I won't stop. If something happens to me, tell Mr. Montes to look for the red folder under the floorboard in my closet. That's where the rest of the notebook pages are." My blood ran cold. At the bottom of the page, Jacob had added one more line. "If I disappear, don't believe anything Dad says." The next day, Montes appeared in visitation with grim eyes. "He's gone," he said flatly. The words hit me like a punch. "What do you mean, gone?" "Aaron pulled him out of school again. Neighbors say they left the house yesterday in the middle of the night. No word since. Mrs. Quinn says she hasn't seen Jacob. Police won't treat it as a crime. Says a father has the right to move his son wherever he wants. But Frank," Montes leaned closer, "it feels like he's running. And not just from us." My chest burned. "From Lucas Martin?" Montes blinked. "You know the name?" I nodded. "LM. The initials all over the notebook." "Lucas Martin, the owner's son at Westfield. Slick, entitled, always circling the company money. If Aaron was in bed with him back then, it explains everything. Why the trial was rushed. Why the evidence pointed to me. Why the jury never heard the whole story." Montes's mouth set in a grim line. "Martin's still around, wealthier than ever. Owns real estate, construction contracts, political connections. If Jacob has proof tying him to the theft, Frank, that boy is in danger." I slammed my cuffed fists on the table. "We have to find him." Montes sighed, pushing his glasses higher. "I'm a lawyer, not a detective. But I've filed a motion with the court using the evidence Jacob already gave us. We've got Quinn's affidavit, Gibbs's testimony, the bank statements, the ticket stub, the notebook copies. The judge can't ignore all of it. The hearing's been scheduled for next month." Next month. My grandson didn't have a month. The days dragged by like lead. I tried writing Jacob another letter, but it was returned unopened. Recipient unknown. I begged Ramirez for scraps of news. Nothing. Every night I lay awake, replaying the last time I saw him. His fire, his stubborn determination. He was just 15. He should have been worried about exams, about basketball tryouts, about which girl might notice him. Instead, he was hiding coded notebooks and sneaking evidence out from under his father's nose. I hated Aaron more than I thought possible, not just for what he'd done to me, but for dragging his son into this mess. A week later, I finally got news. Montes arrived with a thin smile. We got lucky. A contact of mine spotted Aaron and Jacob in Indianapolis. They're using a motel under a fake name. Jacob smuggled out another note through Mrs. Quinn's cousin. He handed me the paper. "Grandpa," Jacob had written, "Dad says we're going to keep moving. He won't tell me where. He's on edge all the time, yelling, making calls when he thinks I'm asleep. I overheard him last night. He was talking to someone, I think Martin. Dad said, 'You promised protection. You said he'd never find us.' Then he saw me listening and slammed the phone down. I don't know how much longer I can keep sending letters, but I won't stop trying. I'm not letting this end with you in here." I gripped the paper so tightly it nearly tore. Montes's voice dropped. "Frank, the boy's risking everything. If Aaron feels cornered, if Martin thinks Jacob's a liability." He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. That night, I had a memory so sharp it cut me. I was back on the job site 25 years ago, sun blazing over the half-finished beams of a house. Aaron was just starting out at Westfield, fresh college degree in hand, the golden boy with ambition written all over him. "Dad," he'd said, leaning against a stack of lumber, "you don't get it. You kill yourself for scraps while the real money goes upstairs. We're the ones who bleed for it. Why shouldn't we take our cut?" I'd glared at him. "Because we don't take what isn't ours. That's not how I raised you." He'd smirked then, that same smirk I saw in court when he swore against me. And now, all these years later, that choice had come back, not just to destroy me, but to put his own son at risk. 2 weeks before the hearing, everything shifted again. It was lights out when Ramirez rushed to my cell, his face pale. "Frank, you need to brace yourself, there's news." My stomach clenched. "Jacob?" They were in a car accident outside St. Louis. Local cops say Aaron was driving, ran off the road. He's in critical condition. Jacob's alive, bruised up, but alive. My knees nearly gave out. Relief and fear battled inside me. "Where is he now?" "Hospital, under watch." But here's the catch. Martin's men know. Word is they've been sniffing around the hospital asking questions. Cops think it's just reporters. I don't. The room spun. My grandson, barely alive, still in danger, and I was locked in a cage with nothing but my rage. The next morning, Montes stormed into visitation, his briefcase rattling. "This is it, Frank. The accident changes things. Jacob's been listed as a witness in the court docket. If anything happens to him, it'll look like obstruction. The judge authorized emergency protection." My hands gripped the table. "He's safe?" "Safer," Montes corrected grimly. "But Martin's reach is long. We need to move fast." He opened the briefcase and laid out papers. "We're filing the petition today. With everything we have, plus Jacob's eyewitness accounts, the court will have to reopen your case. But we need Jacob to testify, and that means keeping him alive long enough to take the stand." I stared at the papers, at the stack of evidence 25 years in the making. For the first time since the clang of the gavel all those years ago, I felt the taste of real hope. But it was poisoned by the thought that my freedom might come at the cost of my grandson's life. That night, as the hum of prison settled around me, I whispered into the darkness like a prayer. "Hold on, Jacob. Hold on. Don't let him take you too. There's a rhythm to prison life that never changes. Wake up to the clang, chow line, yard, count, lights out, repeat." For years that rhythm was all I had, an endless loop that numbed me into survival. But once Montes told me Jacob had been added as a witness, that rhythm shattered. Every clang, every key turning in the lock became a drumbeat counting down to one thing: the hearing. The morning began like any other. Breakfast was rubbery eggs and a biscuit hard enough to chip a tooth. I pushed it around my tray, appetite gone. Ramirez stopped by, lowering his voice. "Got news. Jacob's under federal protection now." I looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" "U.S. Marshals picked him up from the hospital. He's being held at a safe house till the hearing. Your son's still critical, sedated. They say it could go either way." I swallowed hard. "And Martin?" Ramirez shook his head. "Man like that's got ears everywhere. But at least the boy ain't walking free where they can snatch him." Relief warred with dread. Protection wasn't the same as safety. not against men like Lucas Martin. 2 days later, Montes appeared at visitation, looking more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. He set down his briefcase, rubbed his temples. "We've got the hearing date locked, January 12th. Judge Harmon. He's tough but fair. If we present the evidence clean, I think we've got a shot." I nodded, gripping the table. "And Jacob?" Montes hesitated. "He's scared, Frank. He's just a kid, but he's determined. Says he wants to do this for you. For the family name. For himself." Tears burned my eyes. "He shouldn't have to carry this weight." Montes leaned in. "He shouldn't, but he is. And I'll be honest, the prosecution's already fighting us. They'll say Quinn's memory is unreliable after 25 years. They'll say Gibbs is a bitter old man trying to rewrite history. They'll say Jacob is just a confused teenager manipulated by his grandfather." "Manipulated?" I spat. "That's what they called me when I tried to defend myself. That's their word for truth they don't want to hear." Montes met my eyes. "That's why we need Jacob on that stand. Clear, honest, undeniable." That night, I dreamed of Jacob again. Not the boy I'd met in visitation, but a younger version, 8 or 9, riding a bike down a sunlit street I'd never seen. In the dream, I was running behind him, shouting encouragement. He looked back and smiled, a smile so bright it made my chest ache. Then the street darkened, the bike wobbled, and behind him, shadows grew tall, reaching for him. I woke with my heart pounding, sweat soaking the thin mattress. The days crept by. News trickled in through Montes and Ramirez. Aaron was recovering slowly, drifting in and out of consciousness. Sometimes lucid enough to mutter apologies, sometimes so delirious he called for his mother. I couldn't stop wondering if he'd ever face me again, and whether I wanted him to. But Martin was the storm cloud above everything. Rumors flew through the prison grapevine that he'd sent men to visit Gibbs, that someone had been watching Quinn's house, that Montes himself had been followed leaving court. Every whisper tightened the vice on my chest. Then came Jacob's letter, delivered by the marshals through Montes. "Grandpa, they won't tell me where we are. They keep the blinds closed. We move houses every couple days. The marshals say it's for my safety, but I hate it. I feel like a prisoner too. Still, I'm ready. I want to testify. I want them to hear me. I've been practicing what I'll say. I'll tell the judge what Mrs. Quinn saw, what I found in Dad's closet, what was in the notebook. I'll tell them you didn't do this. You don't belong there. I know Dad made terrible choices. I don't know if I can forgive him yet. But I want you to know, no matter what happens, I believe you. Hold on, Grandpa. We're so close." I pressed the letter to my chest and let the tears come. For 25 years, no one had believed me. Not the jury, not my neighbors, not even my wife before she passed. But Jacob did, and that meant everything. 1 week before the hearing, Montes rushed in with urgency written all over him. "Martin made his move," he said. My blood chilled. What happened? Someone tried to breach the safe house. 2 men in a van parked down the street. One had a police scanner. They were caught before they got close, but it rattled the marshals. "They're moving Jacob again, higher security this time." I slammed my fists on the table. "They won't stop. They'll keep coming until we nail Martin to the wall," Montes finished, his voice hard. "And we will. The notebook pages Jacob copied are a smoking gun. Payments to Martin, notes about contracts, kickbacks. If the judge sees them, Martin's done." I shook my head. "If Jacob lives to hand them over." Montes stared at me, weary but unshaken. "He will, I promise." That night, I sat in my cell staring at the ceiling, replaying every choice that had led here. If I had pushed Aaron harder when he first started talking about shortcuts, if I had seen the greed in his eyes sooner, maybe none of this would have happened. Now the only thing standing between me and freedom, between Jacob and safety, was a courtroom I hadn't seen in a quarter century. The morning of the hearing finally arrived. The guards woke me early, shackled my wrists, and led me into a van that rattled down the icy Ohio roads. I stared out the small barred window, watching fields blur past, every fence post counting off 25 lost years. When we arrived at the courthouse, cameras flashed through the frost. Reporters shouted my name, their voices muffled by the glass. "Franklin, do you have anything to say? Are you guilty? Are you innocent?" I stayed silent. My voice would come later. Inside, they led me into a holding cell beside the courtroom. The air smelled like old wood and disinfectant. My heart pounded with every tick of the clock. Montes appeared, his tie askew, briefcase stuffed with files. "It's happening, Frank. Today we put it all on the record. Today the world hears the truth." I gripped his hand through the bars. "And Jacob?" "He's here. In protective custody, guarded by marshals. When it's time, they'll bring him in." My knees almost buckled. After all the waiting, all the silence, all the years of being nothing but inmate 3217. Today, I might finally be Franklin Wade again. But deep down, one fear burned hotter than all the rest. Would Lucas Martin sit quietly while his empire crumbled? Or would he make one final move before Jacob ever reached the witness stand? Courtrooms smell like old paper and fear. That was the first thought that hit me as the guards walked me into the Franklin County Courthouse, shackled hands clinking with every step. I hadn't stood in a courtroom since the day the gavel came down and erased my life. That day, the benches were full of neighbors whispering, reporters scribbling, and my son weeping crocodile tears. Now, 25 years later, the benches were full again. Different faces, same hunger for a story. Only this time, I wasn't the villain, not entirely. They seated me beside Montes at the defense table. My orange jumpsuit had been traded for a suit jacket one of the marshals had provided, a little too big, sleeves swallowing my wrists. But even in a suit, the shackles reminded everyone what I was. Judge Harmon entered, a tall man with steel-gray hair and an expression carved from granite. His gavel cracked. "This court will hear arguments in the petition to reopen the case of Franklin Wade, convicted in 1998 of grand larceny and embezzlement. Defense, are you ready to proceed?" Montes rose. "Yes, Your Honor." The state's attorney stood across from us, a younger man with slicked hair and the kind of smile that made you want to punch it off his face. "Ready, Your Honor." And just like that, 25 years of silence cracked open. Montes started with the affidavits. Mrs. Quinn's statement, sworn and notarized, detailing the night she saw Aaron carry a duffel bag into my house. Ronald Gibbs's testimony, describing the cooked numbers and Martin's name surfacing in shady transactions. The state's attorney scoffed. "Your Honor, these are unreliable memories from decades ago. Neighbors and bitter employees with axes to grind. This is nothing more than smoke and speculation." Montes adjusted his glasses. "Then let's talk about the paper trail." He laid out the bank statements Jacob had uncovered. Large deposits far above Aaron's salary, lining up perfectly with the months before my arrest. Then, the airline ticket, one way to Miami, purchased 2 days before the supposed theft. The state's attorney shifted uncomfortably but rallied. "Even if these documents are real, they don't prove Mr. Wade's innocence. At best, they suggest others may have been involved. That doesn't erase his conviction." That's when Montes dropped the hammer. "The coded notebook," he said, lifting photocopied pages, handwritten by Aaron Wade in his own hand, detailing payouts to LM, Lucas Martin, the owner's son at Westfield Construction. These aren't rumors. They're records. They show a conspiracy that framed my client as a scapegoat, while Martin and Aaron pocketed millions. The courtroom buzzed like a kicked beehive. The judge rapped his gavel. Order. Then came the moment I both dreaded and prayed for. Defense calls Jacob Wade to the stand. The double doors at the back opened. 2 U.S. Marshals escorted Jacob in, their presence heavy, their eyes scanning the room for threats. My grandson looked small beside them, but his chin was lifted, eyes steady. He glanced at me as he passed, and for a heartbeat, the courtroom disappeared. It was just the two of us, bound by blood, by truth, by the weight of everything Aaron had broken. Jacob took the oath, his voice shaking but firm. He sat, hands folded tightly in his lap. "State your name for the record," Montes prompted. "Jacob Wade. And your relation to the petitioner." "He's my grandfather." The words nearly undid me. Montes kept it steady. "Jacob, you've spent time recently with your grandfather." "Why?" Jacob swallowed. "Because I wanted the truth. My dad always told me Grandpa stole from the company. But things didn't add up. For a school project, I started asking questions. That's when I met Mrs. Quinn. She remembered my dad carrying a duffel bag into Grandpa's house the night before the arrest. That didn't match what my dad told me." Montes nodded. "And what else did you find?" Jacob pulled out copies of bank statements. His hands trembled, but his voice stayed clear. "I found these in my dad's closet. Deposits way higher than his salary. And this." He held up the ticket stub. "A flight he bought 2 days before the arrest. He said he never planned to run. But this shows he did." The prosecutor stood. "Objection. Hearsay, speculation, and this boy has no business interpreting financial records." Judge Harmon considered, then waved it off. "Objection overruled. Continue." Montes leaned closer. "Jacob, did you find anything else?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. "A notebook. My dad wrote in it, but it was in code. I copied pages. It shows meetings, payments, initials. Always the same. LM. I didn't know what it meant, but Grandpa told me it was Lucas Martin, the owner's son." The courtroom erupted again. The judge hammered the gavel. "Order!" The prosecutor's face was red. "This is outrageous. A teenager speculating about codes he doesn't understand." Montes cut him off. "Your Honor, we'll be submitting these notebook pages to forensic analysis. But the timing, the amounts, the corroboration with Gibbs's testimony, it all points to Martin." For a moment, the room felt like it was tipping. The weight of truth pressed against 25 years of lies. And then the doors at the back slammed open. A man strode in, flanked by attorneys and security. Lucas Martin, older, broader, but with the same smug entitlement I remembered from the job site. He didn't even glance at me. He walked straight to the prosecutor's table, whispered in his ear, then sat down as if he owned the room. Jacob's face paled. His hands clenched. The judge frowned. "Mr. Martin, you are not a party to this hearing. Sit quietly, or you'll be removed." But the damage was done. His presence was a warning, not just to Jacob, but to everyone watching. Montes whispered urgently to the judge, pushing for protective custody orders. The marshals tightened around Jacob, but I could see the boy's chest heaving, his courage shaking under Martin's stare. So I did the only thing I could. I caught Jacob's eye and mouthed the words, "I believe in you." He nodded, jaw tight, and turned back to Montes. "Yes," Jacob said loudly, steadying himself. "The notebook was my dad's, and it proves my grandfather didn't do this. He's innocent." The silence that followed was heavier than steel. For the first time in 25 years, my truth was spoken aloud in a courtroom. But deep down, I knew the war wasn't over. Martin wouldn't walk away quietly, not with so much to lose. And as the judge called for a recess, I saw him glance at me across the room, his eyes cold and calculating. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. Recess in a courtroom isn't like recess on a playground. It's not laughter and sunshine. It's whispers in corners, phones buzzing, strategies being rewritten in real time. When Judge Harmon's gavel struck and we broke for lunch, the air was thick enough to choke on. Jacob had just declared me innocent in open court. He'd pointed a trembling hand at evidence that tied Lucas Martin's name to the crime, and Martin himself had sauntered in like a king, daring anyone to dethrone him. Now, the whole courthouse felt like it was holding its breath. They moved Jacob out first, flanked by marshals. I wanted to go to him, to put a hand on his shoulder, to say, "You did it, kid." But I was shackled, dragged back toward the holding cells. As I passed, I caught one last glimpse of Martin, lounging at the prosecution's table, whispering to his lawyer. His eyes flicked toward Jacob, cold and calculating, then shifted to me. And in that brief glance, I knew it. He wasn't finished. In the holding cell, Montes paced, tie loosened, phone pressed to his ear. He muttered into the receiver, then slammed it shut. "That bastard's making calls already," he growled. "Reporters are swarming. Half the State House probably knows about this hearing now." I gripped the bars. "What does that mean for us?" "It means pressure," he said. "Martin's got friends in high places, judges, politicians, donors, but it also means exposure. The more public this gets, the harder it'll be for him to bury it quietly." I leaned back against the wall, heart pounding. "As long as Jacob's safe." Montes hesitated. "The marshals are good, Frank, but Martin's men are relentless. They already tried once." The memory of that letter, Jacob writing, "If I disappear, don't believe Dad," clawed at my chest. The afternoon session began with more testimony. Gibbs was wheeled in, frail and pale, but his voice carried weight. He described the cooked books, the missing funds, the payments that led straight to Martin. The prosecutor shredded at him, called him senile, bitter, unreliable. But Gibbs didn't waver. "I stayed quiet to protect my job," he said firmly. "And I've regretted it every day since. Franklin Wade is innocent. Lucas Martin and Aaron Wade weren't." The courtroom buzzed. Martin's jaw tightened. I felt a flicker of something I hadn't dared touch in years: vindication. But then the doors opened again, and my heart nearly stopped. Aaron. He was pale, walking with a cane, a marshal steadying his arm. He looked 20 years older than when I last saw him, though only weeks had passed. Bandages peeked from under his collar, and his face was drawn tight with pain. Gasps rippled through the benches. The prosecutor didn't call him. Montes hadn't warned me. Aaron had insisted on being here. The judge frowned. "Mr. Wade, you are not under subpoena. Why are you here?" Aaron's voice was rough, ragged. "Because I have something to say." The prosecutor objected instantly. "Your Honor, this is irregular. He's not on the witness list." Judge Harmon considered, then said, "This case is already irregular. I'll allow it. But tread carefully, Mr. Wade." Aaron took the stand. My stomach twisted into knots. He looked at me once, just once, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen since he was a boy. Shame. "Tell us why you're here," Judge Harmon instructed. Aaron gripped the rail of the witness stand, knuckles white. "Because my father didn't do this. I did." The room erupted. Reporters scribbled like their pens were on fire. The prosecutor shouted objections. Martin's face darkened to stone, but Aaron kept speaking. "I stole the money. I planted the cash. I forged his signature, all of it. I was drowning in debt, and Lucas Martin saw his chance. He told me if I helped him, we'd both be rich. He said my father was old, disposable, perfect to take the fall, and I believed him." Tears filled my eyes. Aaron's voice cracked. "I ruined my father's life. My mother died believing he was a thief. And my son." He broke off, glancing at Jacob, who sat frozen under the marshal's watch. "My son grew up in lies because I couldn't face the truth." Judge Harmon banged his gavel. "Order. If you cannot keep the gallery silent, I will clear the room." The prosecutor pounced. "So we're supposed to believe this man, a proven liar and admitted thief, suddenly has a change of heart? That's convenient." Aaron's jaw tightened. "Convenient? I almost died in that car wreck. I thought I was finished. And I realized the only thing I've done in my life is destroy everyone who ever loved me. If I can do one thing right before I go, it's this." Montes leaned toward me, whispering fiercely, "This could be it, Frank. This could crack everything wide open." But even as hope rose in my chest, fear followed close behind. Because if Aaron had just put Martin's name on record, then Martin had every reason to strike harder than ever. The hearing recessed again, chaos spilling into the hallways. Reporters shoved microphones at anyone with a pulse. Headlines would hit the airwaves before sunset. "Son admits guilt in father's 25-year conviction." Back in the holding cell, Montes was buzzing like a live wire. "This is it, Frank. Between Jacob's testimony, Gibbs's affidavit, and Aaron's confession, we've built a wall Martin can't climb. The judge will have no choice but to vacate the conviction. You'll walk free." I pressed my hands to my face, fighting the flood of emotions. Freedom. The word felt foreign, dangerous, almost too bright to look at directly. But then Montes's expression darkened. "There's something else." On our way back from court, one of the marshals noticed a black SUV tailing us. Plates traced to a shell company, one of Martin's. They're watching Jacob. They're watching Aaron. This isn't over. My heart slammed against my ribs. Then they're still in danger. Montes nodded grimly. Until Martin's in cuffs, yes. That night, back in my cell, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. For the first time in 25 years, I believed I might actually walk out of these walls. But freedom didn't matter if Jacob wasn't there to share it. And Aaron, broken, confessing at last, had finally given me back my truth. But would Martin let him live long enough to make it count? The gavel hadn't fallen yet, and I knew deep in my bones the storm was coming. The final day of the hearing dawned gray and bitterly cold. From my small window in the county holding cell, I watched the snow fall in slow spirals onto the courthouse steps. People hurried in with scarves pulled tight, cameras slung around their necks. Reporters wanted blood, either mine or Martin's. I didn't care which way they leaned. All I cared was that Jacob would be alive when the gavel struck. Montes arrived early, his tie crooked, his eyes ringed with sleepless nights. He laid a stack of motions on the table. "Today's the day, Frank," he said, voice low but steady. "The judge will decide whether to vacate your conviction. We've thrown everything at him: Jacob's testimony, Quinn's affidavit, Gibbs's confession, the bank records, the notebook, and Aaron's statement. If Harmon doesn't grant this, nothing will." I swallowed hard. "And Martin?" Montes's jaw tightened. "His people are everywhere. One of my paralegals spotted 2 men outside her apartment last night, same SUV that tailed us before. They want to rattle us, maybe worse." He leaned closer. "But the marshals doubled Jacob's security. They won't get to him, Frank. Not today." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. The bailiff led us back into the courtroom. The benches were packed, a sea of winter coats and flashing cameras. Martin sat at the prosecutor's table again, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp as knives. He looked like a man who'd never heard the word no in his life. Jacob was already seated under heavy guard, pale but steady. When our eyes met, I mouthed, "Proud of you." He gave the faintest nod. Aaron wasn't there. Word had come that he'd collapsed in the hospital overnight. Internal bleeding. They weren't sure if he'd make it. The thought tore at me. My son, who had stolen my life, who had finally tried to give it back, now paying with his own. The judge called for order. Montes rose, his voice firm but measured. "Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming. For 25 years, Franklin Wade has carried a conviction that was not his. The testimony shows a conspiracy led by Lucas Martin and abetted by Aaron Wade. The documents confirm it. This man has served a life sentence for a crime he did not commit. Justice demands his conviction be vacated and his freedom restored." The prosecutor tried to fight back, claimed Jacob was too young to understand, that Gibbs was dying and bitter, that Aaron was lying to save his father. But the words felt hollow, flimsy against the mountain of proof. The courtroom was hushed as Judge Harmon leaned forward. "I have reviewed the evidence. I have weighed the testimony. What I see is a conviction built on forged documents, false testimony, and a rush to judgment. This court cannot ignore the miscarriage of justice. Therefore, the conviction of Franklin Wade is vacated, effective immediately." The gavel struck. For a moment, the sound didn't register. Then it hit me. I was free. The room erupted. Reporters surged. People gasped. The marshals tightened around Jacob, pushing him toward the exit. Montes gripped my shoulder, tears shining behind his glasses. "You did it, Frank," he whispered. "You're a free man." But just as the weight lifted, chaos broke. At the back of the room, a man lunged from the gallery, gun in hand. The crack of the shot echoed like thunder. Screams erupted. Marshals tackled Jacob to the ground, covering him with their bodies. The gunman was wrestled down, the weapon clattering across the floor. In the chaos, I caught a glimpse of Martin. He hadn't moved. He sat calmly, hands folded, eyes fixed on me with icy disdain. He hadn't pulled the trigger, but the message was clear. Even free, I'd never truly escape his reach. The marshals swarmed us out of the courtroom, down hallways that smelled of panic and gunpowder. Outside, reporters screamed questions, cameras flashing like lightning. "Franklin, how does it feel to be exonerated? Do you blame your son? Will you sue the state?" I ignored them all. My eyes were locked on Jacob, who stood shaken but unhurt, his face pale as paper. I pulled him into my arms as far as the cuffs allowed. For the first time in my life, I heard him whisper it into my ear, "Grandpa." And I broke. That evening, Montes met me in the release office. The paperwork was a mountain, but every signature felt like a shackle snapping. The prison warden shook my hand stiffly, avoiding my eyes. Ramirez was there too, grinning like a proud brother. "Knew you didn't belong here," he said, clapping my shoulder. "Glad I lived long enough to see the day." I choked back tears. "You kept me human, Ramirez. I'll never forget it." Then the final gate buzzed, the heavy steel doors sliding open. Snow swirled in the cold night air. And there, waiting beyond the gates, was Jacob. No guards now, no glass between us. Just a boy and a man, bound by blood, by truth, by survival. I stepped forward. He ran into my arms. Later, as we drove away in Montes's car, I looked back at the prison shrinking in the rearview mirror. For 25 years, those walls had been my whole world. Now they were nothing but a shadow behind me. Jacob sat beside me, his head resting on my shoulder. "What happens now, Grandpa?" he asked softly. I looked out at the snowy road stretching ahead, endless and uncertain. "Now," I said, voice thick with tears, "we go home, and we rebuild, brick by brick." I never got the chance to reconcile with Aaron. He passed away 2 nights later in the hospital, never waking again. His confession remained on the record, his last act in a life filled with betrayal. I grieved him, not the man he became, but the boy I once carried on my shoulders, the son who might have been. As for Martin, the investigation swallowed him. Federal charges, grand juries, indictments piling up. Maybe he'd fight his way out, maybe not. But for once, his shadow wasn't mine to bear. What mattered was the boy beside me, my grandson, my blood, my second chance. When we pulled up to Mrs. Quinn's house, she was waiting with a casserole and tears in her eyes. For the first time in decades, I stepped through a doorway without chains on my wrists, and I breathed. Free. Finally free.